Welcome to my channel Dr. Munshi Nasser Skill Tone. In this video, I'm going to talk about the simplest and easiest way to analyze the meta-analysis using a practical example. So without wasting any time, let's get started.
Let's start with experiments.
First of all, we have to select a title, right? And the title that I have selected for this study is the IPO underpricing and its factors. For instance, this is the title that I have selected, the determinants of IPO underpricing. So this is a topic which is fall under financial world, or you can say financial analyst. So in this case, we are talking about how the initial public offerings, why it is underpriced, what are the factors behind it. Okay, and this is our research title, and we have search including inclusion and exclusion criteria. I have many other videos where I discuss about the systematic literature review, as the meta-analysis is one of the systematic literature review type. So we have to use inclusion and exclusion criteria in order to select our sample articles. So here I have selected few articles, and as you can see here, these are my articles. So almost 16 to 17 articles I have selected. Why these 16 and 17 articles? Because these articles are fall under my criteria. Either they are following the same sample size, or the determinants that they have chosen are similar, or you can say the dependent variable are similar. These are the criteria that I have selected for my meta-analysis. In my previous video, I have discussed in detail why meta-analysis and how we can apply meta-analysis concept in different articles for selection. So with that note, you can check those videos, but for this simplicity, here we have selected these articles based on our underpricing variable, where the underpricing variable is considered as one of the important variable, for instance dependent variable, or we are targeting the variable underpricing and finding out the determinants from different countries. We have selected those samples or those articles as our study samples. Okay, now as you can see here, there are few articles, and as you know that I have to collect some information. So meta-analysis, you can use regression analysis, you can use correlation, you can use some other different type of statistical indices for meta-analysis. For simplicity, we are taking descriptive statistics, especially mean and standard deviation of our articles. Now here you can see this is a descriptive statistics of one of our sample study, one of our study that I have selected where underpricing is there, number of observation or sample 58, and the mean is 0.37, standard deviation is 0.27. Likewise, I have several articles where descriptive statistics is given and underpricing, mean and standard deviation is given over here. And then again we have another paper where we can see, if we scroll down, and you will see that the article does have the descriptive statistics where it shows the mean, standard deviation and the number of samples. So here underpricing is there, okay, and the descriptive statistics underpricing over here, number of observation 67, minimum mean is 0.199, standard deviation is 0.198. Likewise, from this article, all those articles where descriptive statistics targeting the underpricing variable and also its determinants, we are selecting those articles and picking the descriptive statistics value, like underpricing average 136, number of observations 63, and standard deviation is 238. All this information we put in this particular Excel file. As you can see here that I have listed down 18 studies where 2020, 2022 most recents are there, and as I said, it's the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So our inclusion criteria was 10 years. So from 2010 to 2022, something like that. So we have selected those articles under those timeline. And then this is our target variables under pricing. And this is the mean that we have selected from those articles. This is the standard deviation that we have selected from those articles. Same goes to sample size. So these are the three important information we have collected from those articles. Now we are going to start our meta-analysis. Now first of all, we need to understand with this information what we can do actually. Normally we cannot apply the two group t-test, or we cannot apply just simply fixed effect or random effect model, because we do not have standard error information directly given in this particular case. Another way we can also say that normally in the meta analysis we need to have a two groups, for example group 1 and group 2. In other words, we call it treatment group and control group. So we do not have treatment group and control group over here. We simply have a one variable and different mean and standard deviation and the sample size of across the studies. So the first thing that we can do with this information for meta-analysis is find out the weighted mean of these studies. And in order to find out the weighted mean, you can choose two ways. One is you can either go to the rtutor, you can upload, this is also a free website. You can choose the sample that I have selected. You can see here, this is the research work. Click this one, okay, and then it will give you the information of the variables. We have the variables over here, and we know that these are numeric variables, so we can close it down, and you can ask calculate weighted mean and standard deviation of this data set. Now I submit it. Let me see what it gives us. So with this data we can calculate the weighted mean of these information that is taken from the descriptive statistics. So one of the way we can calculate for the meta-analysis is creating weighted mean and weighted standard deviation and find out the variation from the each study from weighted mean that we have calculated. For us nowadays, Chatgpt can help us very easily. So what I do, I go to the Chatgpt and ask them to calculate the weighted mean column. So you can see here that the weighted mean formula over here, it says that weighted mean is the average or typical sample size of ith study. W. Xi stands for mean underpricing and N is the number of studies. So all we have to do, just follow this formula, okay, and you can use the same formula to calculate over here in the Excel data. You can do it by following this formula, very easy one. And once we calculate it, we have found that our weighted mean is 74.76%. You can do it using the same way, using here the weighted mean. Let's assume that weighted mean we are talking about. Now what is the criteria? It says that we have to use WI, which is the sample size times the mean underpricing divided by the sample size. Okay, so what we have to do, like sample size is this is the sample size times our mean. We can see this is our mean, and within bracket we can see here within bracket and divided by our sample size, which means this one. So we entered this one and then we just have to draw the line. You can see over here, and you got your weighted mean of each study. Like that we can use the standard deviation, the weighted standard deviation. The same way we can go to the Chatgpt and ask them to find out the standard deviation. Here it says this is the standard deviation of our finding out the different studies which is deviated from the weighted mean, and in order to find out, this is the same way we can calculate the weighted standard deviation. Simple, using the Excel you can calculate it very easily. So this is the weighted mean and a weighted standard deviation. Now we can see what does it mean actually. It means actually if the standard deviation is, let's assume that in this case it says 51.01% the standard deviation. In this case we can see it deviates hugely from the mean, so that's why we can say that there are some differences across the studies, and therefore these studies are not, you can say, without the publication bias, or there are some extreme differences between the mean values across the studies, because the standard deviation showing that it has some differences across the studies and it's a huge differences. So this is one of the findings that you can calculate. Now the another way you can calculate very easily is the finding out the forest plot and funnel plot. Forest plot and funnel plot. In order to find out the forest plot and funnel plot, I also take the help from the Chatgpt, and you can see forest plot and funnel plot. It says what does it mean actually. Forest plot shows the x-axis, the sample, the standard deviation which we have calculated, and from the standard deviation we can use standard error calculation, and in the x-axis we put the mean. So we have the mean and standard error. We can see whether our confidence interval, we create the confidence interval, and then we can use the forest plot for visualizing our analysis. So you can see here that the forest plot displays the point estimates from individual studies, in this case underpricing values, along with their confidence interval. It allows a visual comparison of the results across the studies and overall effect. In order to do that, we have calculated the forest plot and we need a standard error. So how do we calculate the standard error? We know there is a simple way of calculating the standard error, and the standard error calculation is standard deviation and root over n. Standard deviation root over n. N is the number of observation. Let me see whether we have calculated it correctly. If we look at the, you can see over here, this is the standard error is equal to standard deviation and divided by n. Standard error using the standard deviation divided by the root n. You can do it by using the Excel file as well. You just have to say standard error, and then what you have to do, the standard deviation you already have, this is our standard deviation, okay, and then we divide it by root n, number of sample size, right? So how we can divide it by, you can go to the function and you can see, go to the more function, okay, and here you can see that there are many things you can do. So we are one root, okay, and say go, and you see you have square root. So we calculate the square root, and what we need over here, number, this is the value that we need, the sample size, right? Our sample size. And then what we have, we press the OK button, and this is the calculation of the standard error. We draw the line until the next line, we have our standard error calculation. So now this is how in the Excel you can calculate the standard error. Now we go back to the standard error formula, and this is the exactly same way we calculated using the Excel file. Now from there we can see the margin of error 1.96 is the 95% confidence interval that we have choose, and from the value of the table we find the 1.96 is our standard deviation or the confidence interval from 95%, and multiplied by our standard error. Once we create this information, we can easily find out the confidence interval of each of our study. Lower confidence interval, mean minus margin of error, and upper limit of confidence interval, mean plus margin of error. We know how to calculate standard error. We know how to find out the 95% confidence interval from the table value 1.96, and you can easily calculate the margin of error for our study and create the forest plot just like this one, okay. Very simple, very easy. You can always use the JASP software for calculating the forest plot, yes. And the another visualization is the funnel plot. Funnel plot is used for the presence of publication bias. So if the funnel plot is look like this, then you can say your studies are less of publication bias. But if your funnel plots are not asymmetric, then you can say you have publication bias presence in your sample. Publication bias meaning that there are few studies which give the significance results, but they're supposed to give you insignificant results. It doesn't make sense when we put the weighted mean. For instance, here it says that funnel plot assesses the presence of publication bias. The plot displays the effect estimates from individual studies against a measure of study size or precision. If there is no publication bias, the plot should resemble a symmetrical funnel which means this is. So in the meta-analysis, one of the important point here is to find out the effect size, and we calculate the weighted average mean. This is one of the effect size, and we calculate the standard deviation to see how the mean deviates from the each studies we have calculated. That is also called the effect size. Another way is finding out the standard error and plotting using the forest plot. Now final point here is the funnel plot, and we can easily find out the funnel plot over here. I asked the Chatgpt to calculate the funnel plot. This is the funnel plot, and here my studies are not symmetric, it shows asymmetric. So here each blue dot represents a study. Its horizontal position indicates the mean underpricing value of the study, and vertical position represents the precision of the study, which is the sample size. Okay, and here the red dashed line, this red dashed line is overall weighted mean that we have calculated earlier, right? Now how to interpret the plot? The ideal scenario is that any biases, the study should be distributed symmetrically. There is no bias, without any bias around the red dashed line. So red dashed line and this straight, this is the funnel plot looks like if there is no bias. Smaller studies lower down the plot will have a more variability and thus will spread out more on the horizontal line. You can say this is the smaller study and here it is spread out in the horizontal line. Okay, and the larger studies higher up the plot will have less variability and it cluster closer to the overall effect size or red line. Here if the plot is asymmetrical, it might be indicate publication bias or other biases. Okay, from our plot there is some asymmetry, especially among the smaller studies, suggesting potential publication bias or other factors affecting the distribution. Now this is the study result of our funnel plot. Now you might say that, doctor, we do not have the subscription of Chatgpt 4. How we can do the analysis? It is very simple. Use the JASP software, go to the software and open the computer data, upload your data set, research work under pricing. Okay, and then once you upload it, you can see here that there are information. You can use the classical meta-analysis. We already have uploaded. Our sample size, standard error are all calculated. Go to the classical meta-analysis. I already showed the video on how to use meta-analysis using a JASP software in my previous video. You can take a look at that. So you can see here the effect size, our mean is our effect size. Effect size standard error, we already calculated it. So now here you can see the forest plot is created by the JASP software. At the same time, this is the funnel plot, and you can see JASP software easily calculate the forest plot and the funnel plot for you. You do not need the Chatgpt to calculate for you. You can use JASP software for using your data to create forest and funnel plot. All you have to do, put the mean as the effect size and standard error, effect size standard error that you have calculated using your Excel file. So this is how, this is the simplest way you can do the meta-analysis. If I recap the whole thing, first you select this information like the sample studies based on your inclusion and exclusion criteria. After that you calculate the standard deviation and the mean from the descriptive statistics put in the Excel file. You can either create a simple weighted mean or weighted standard deviation to find out the variation of your cross section or across the studies. This is one of the findings. Also you can create the standard error calculation the way that I calculated and find out the confidence interval, and once you calculate the confidence interval, you put it in the x-axis and y-axis the number of studies. You can easily find out the forest plot like this. The higher the gray line, the less precision of the study. The smaller the gray line, then this is more accurate the study. Most of the studies are accurate in our case using the forest plot visualization, the effect size and the study number here. And the forest funnel plot, the more symmetric the plot is, you can say you have less publication bias and more deviate from the straight line, the weighted mean. You will find out that higher publication bias presence in your study. I use the same JASP and the Chatgpt to explain the forest plot, funnel plot, weighted mean, weighted standard deviation with my sample data or sample studies to explain the simplest way to do the meta-analysis. There are many other ways using correlation, using other factors like for the fixed effect model, random effect model. I am not using this for the sake of simplicity, for the sake of simple explanation. I use a simple example, real life practical example, in order to demonstrate how to use meta-analysis using JASP, Chatgpt, rtutor, and also the study that I have shared with you with the Excel file. I hope this is useful video for you. If you like my video, you can share with your peers and you can ask any questions in the comment section of this video. I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you, my dear learners. I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.